Welcome back to the Ground and Simplicity podcast. We are here to help moms get back to basics and find joy in being less busy. I'm Bonnie from the Not So Modern Housewife, and I am joined by my good friend Danielle from the Rustic Elk, as well as Riley from Loam. And we're going to be talking to him today about setting intentional time with our families and helping to have more productive mornings. So please tell me how to have more productive mornings with 3 children who I homeschool.
Well, thank you for having me, first and foremost. So my first thing would be to take a little bit of issue with the metaphors we use. So I think, one of the things as we were setting out to build our own homes, my co-founder and I, and our wives, and as we were thinking about what Loam could be, we were very self-reflective, and we thought a lot about the fact that we use these efficiency and productivity metaphors in our lives, and really these are industrial and robot or computer computational metaphors. So productivity, efficiency, these are not necessarily things that we think of when we think of organic matter. And so first thought is, you got to give yourself a lot more grace. I think the world treats us or pushes us towards treating ourselves and our families like robots. And we need to do a lot more understanding that we're not, and not give in to that. I mean, I love what you're about because you're pushing back against the overwhelm and the busyness of our culture. And I think a lot of that comes from this kind of foundational belief. So my first thought is, number one, recognize that every day we're complex beings dealing with complex systems. So everything from the weather to the food to the type of sleep to the moon to all of these things affect us and create the environment, the soil in which our morning is growing, and so we have to be thoughtful about that. But I do think, so instead of saying, hey, there's an ideal way to do a morning, we think a little bit more about rhythms and routines and saying a good morning to us has these components, and it may not always happen. It may happen differently every morning, but it's going to be, it's a good idea to wear clothes if you're leaving the house. It's a good idea to eat food. It's a good idea to brush your teeth or practice kind of standard hygiene, whatever that looks like in your family. And specifically, one of the things that I think is so unique in a family environment is we're participating in kind of forming and equipping this next generation that's coming up. So not only are those habits important for me and you as individuals to remember, we've kind of been taught them. We understand their importance, and we still need help to do them every morning. But I think children especially don't even fully understand it. And so having the conversations ahead of time, establishing the routines and rhythms, and doing and then kind of putting scaffolding around this thing, or putting supports. Trellis is a metaphor I really like, where you're kind of building this thing for growth to happen in a positive direction. And so we think, at Loam, that especially for children, but for everyone, having reminders. So we built a very visual routine tracker. It's basically a checklist, but there's a button you can press and it turns kind of into a game board and you can move through. But I think the important thing is to say, hey, these are the key categories of what we believe health looks like, to find a way to kind of codify that and write it down, and to do so in a way that brings the children along. And so you're all on the same page. And then the final thing I would say is, I think it's important to kind of reflect on, hey, is it working or not? And so having regular rhythms of saying like, hey, that was a tough morning. Like I tried this. I was challenged on this by my co-founder and some other folks in it. It's like, how do we reflect and include the kids? My co-founder does a pretty good job of doing that. And so I asked the kids, hey, well, that was a rough morning. Like, what do you think? And I was astounded that a 4-year-old could say like, well, I was a little tired and I probably should have had a snack before we tried to, get dressed so that I would have been in a better mood. I mean, it was this very cogent conversation, and it's like, shame on me for not thinking more of him at that moment, and including him, bring him along.
Yeah, like I definitely agree. I think that we don't give kids enough credit for how observant they can be. I'm curious, just listening to you talk, have you ever heard of the visible child approach?
No,
Like the parenting style?
no.
So a lot of it is, it basically is based on this concept that children don't act out just for the sake of being bad, but they act out based off of overwhelm or feeling instability or fear, things
That's
like that. And a lot of times, like, us as adults will act out over those same things, and yet we kind of hold the children to a higher standard. And with the visible child approach, a lot of it is kind of modeling the behavior, but then also, treating the kids as human beings and as people, and getting their feedback and kind of making them a part of the process. So, like, especially, when it comes to rhythms, um, is, hey, asking them, hey, how did you feel when we stuck to this routine this morning? Or what do you think we could have done better? Or what would you like to see us do differently?
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, knowing personalities of your children is important, because I definitely think we've got one of our daughters is she's a challenger, and she's going to act out just because she thinks it's fun. But generally, I think what you're saying makes a ton of sense. And I think so much of when we act up or when we can't keep a routine, it's insecurity, and other issues in our own lives, crying out. But yeah, I think including the kids, I mean, this has been the theme, and really, I think, if you kind of think about the way a flourishing family works, and what is the whole point of this thing we're doing, right? In a healthy state, I don't think it's just, I want to feel good as a dad and I want other people to say, wow, that Riley's great. It's like, well, no, I want to raise up human beings who make a positive impact on the world for generations after I'm gone, when they don't even remember what my name was. And in order to do that, we have to invest a lot of time in creating a healthy environment in which those children are growing up and being formed, and they have the freedom to explore things. And one of the ways you do that is you include them, and kind of you honor the fact that they're just little people. And so we've thought a lot about, what does it look like to say, hey, we as adults probably have a calendar system. We might even have, tasks and productivity systems that we've, through our professional lives, have adopted. And then you probably have something with your spouse, depending on how long, you were married prior to having children. You probably have some way you've accomplished communication and coordination on things prior. But as children come into the mix, it's this whole new layer. And there's this whole new opportunity to say, hey, what do we do with these kids who maybe don't have devices or don't have, Gmail accounts where they can have a Google Calendar, or whatever the, choice you have. How do we create a space where they can collaborate and they can form habits and routines themselves, and they can participate in a shared practice of habit and routine in the household? And I think that's really what's driven a lot of our development. Not so much because the world needs another app. I think in many ways it doesn't, but more because we looked and we didn't feel like there was something that we could truly include. Even other platforms that are made for families look a lot like the ones that are made for the workplace and made just for adults. And so we've really made an effort to be inclusive of children, and we're just building for our own households in hopes that we can accomplish that. And then we offer it out to the world in hopes that it's helpful to others as well.
Yeah, I know. I think that's probably one of the biggest arguments that I have to break up with my kids is they'll all individually feel like all of the burden of the work is falling on them and no one else is contributing. And so I think that having that collaborative approach really helps, because we're all talking about what everyone is doing individually, but then they can all see how it all fits together, and everybody has their own jobs, and it's not just one kid who has to do everything.
Yeah, with routines, and then we have a basic kind of task and chore approach now. We're building a more robust approach to chores, which I'm really excited about. It'll be out in the next month or so. But I think some of what we felt in our own households, and as we've talked to users who are on our platform, and just talked to families we respect, having systems that kind of take the burden off of a member of the household for dictating this is the way it needs to go. This is whose turn it is to do so. If there's a screen you look at or a board you look at, a piece of paper, wall calendar, fridge, whatever it is, it kind of externalizes it. And the kid can be frustrated that that's the next step in getting ready for bed or getting ready for school or, the chore that they have this week. But it's not the same as, hey, dad's nagging me again and I have to go do this thing. And he always says I have to do it. And it's always why, no one else ever does this. And it's like, no, actually Loam or some other system does a really good job of making sure that, you don't have to do it 4 times in a row. You do your piece and then it moves to the next kid, and you can trust that. You need to learn to trust your parents, trust your system, trust whatever it is. And so I think that's really important. Just this morning, my son was whining because he was like, well, our older daughter, she never picks up the book. I always pick up. And I'm like, I had her pick up the books yesterday. I know that. But you just feel that weight of the fact that it's your turn and it's no fun. And I understand that, but it was me there. And I think if we had been able to like point to the board and say, no, look, these are like the last 2 weeks, Abigail's actually picked up all the books and it's gone well.
My kids do that with dishes. Like my oldest and my middle daughter usually do the dishes. And then my youngest sometimes will dry them because she's 4 and help put them away. But they argue about who's supposed to wash them. Like, I did it last time, or I want to do it this time. And she always gets to do this part. And I'm like, it's dishes. Just do them.
I really like words, and it's like probably to a fault, as you heard in like the way I started out. But I'm like, always, you can't use that word around me because I just know that it's just not true. It's never going to be true. So I have to be really, but it's like, it's the default, right? And I think it goes back to some of the reason they're pushing back is feels like they don't feel secure in their role in the household, and they're unsure exactly, and they're just playing with, they're growing into their identity and who they are and what their capabilities are.
Yeah, and they don't feel in control. They feel like somebody else is trying to be the boss of them. And they're like, mine are 4, 11, and 12. And they're, at that age where they want to be independent individuals and make their own choices. And then they feel like somebody's trying to boss them around. They don't want to be bossed around anymore.
Yeah. It's especially fun when they're 4.
Well, yeah. But, I mean, it's, when you're just talking about like routines and stuff, it's not really bossing them around. It's just, these things have to be done.
Yeah, it's like my 4-year-old who wants to be independent, but also still wants to be the baby.
Yes.
Yes. That's how
how do you live in that tension?
Yeah.
How do you respect that? Right. They respect the desire to be loved, but also the desire to have freedom and responsibility. I think that's some of what you do. And the way you do that is, one of the ways you do that is you equip them and you include them and you give them places where they can say, hey, this is what we should do this week. And this is how we should do it. And I should say, I could tell you what we're doing at Loam, but you can do this. Many of your listeners probably already have systems, but you can do it in, on that chalkboard you have in your kitchen or mudroom or wherever, you have that sort of thing, wall calendar, whiteboard. There's a lot of great ways you can do it.
I think that the visual aspect of Loam is nice for the kids because it, like, one thing my kids really liked with it is that the images for like each individual thing, each individual chore are so big that it kind of like, it draws the attention. So, and with it being a game board, it moves down the board as they do the chores. So they're not seeing a list of chores that can feel really overwhelming. They're really just seeing like the current thing and the next thing. And so it doesn't feel like so big to them.
Yeah, I think it's just, how do you keep them focused, right? How do you include them and equip them, but at the same time kind of say like, hey, if we all see everything that's going on all the time, it's overwhelming. I mean, that's one of the things, with technology that's so hard is everything's available there. And with any system, if you expose all the information to the user, to the consumer, all of a sudden they're overwhelmed and it's not actually useful. And so, surfacing just the information you need when you need it is so important. I mean, it's another, we got some interesting feedback from some folks, but we made a conscious effort to be a weekly planner. So we're not, we don't have a month view right now. And it's because I think it's that same thing. It's like where you set your horizon and how you define priorities and the things that you need to allocate mental energy and emotional and even physical energy towards is really important. I think it's one of the ways we set ourselves and our children up for success.
Mm-hmm. Now, what would you say, like in terms of creating those morning routines? Obviously, they're going to vary a little bit by family, but what do you see as some of the biggest struggles or hurdles that families deal with trying to establish that routine and stick to it?
Yeah, I mean, I always start by saying the biggest mistake is believing there's some perfect routine. So that's like my first, just give yourself some grace and realize this is it's always evolving, right? Like our homes are, the individuals in our home, there's no stasis in the design. We age, seasons change, all these things. So that's the first kind of starting place. I think the once you get to that though, it's like, hey, what are the most important things that need to happen in the morning, and how do we make sure that that's some of what we're allocating the most energy and attention to? Some families I've talked to say, I don't care if my kids brush their teeth in the morning, as an example of something that's like, yeah, that's nice. It's certainly better for them and the people around them if they do, but if they make it out of the house, but gosh, it'd sure be nice if they were wearing, a coat or shoes, or I want to make sure they get fed. And so I think you have to kind of define what your priorities are in the morning. And a lot of that will change from household to household, right? Some number of our users homeschool, and, the kids aren't going anywhere every day, but others are, there's kids going to 4 different schools, and, there's a lot of things that need to happen, lunches that need to be made, backpacks that need to be packed, all that kind of energy that goes in all those directions. And then, so I think some of it is then sitting down, and this is an opportunity to include the kids, because a lot of times the kids actually have a really good sense of what needs to happen. They know, hey, when I get to school, I should have these things with me, and I want to feel comfortable, or whatever. So it's an opportunity to have them kind of help define what needs to be there. And that, so to me, that's kind of the other piece, is inclusion of the kids. Yeah. And then I think it's just constant feedback and evaluation, right? It's just being willing to have that follow-up chat and be like, why was that hard? Gosh, what do you like about what we do in the mornings? I mean, that's you can take the positive instead of just taking the negative. You say, man, that was a great morning, guys. What happened? What did you think? How did it go? And that's for us, in the car on the way to school, we sometimes have those conversations, and it's fun. Because you're hearing from a 3-year-old or 5-year-old or 6-year-old, these pieces of feedback on this thing that has a huge impact on their life, and you're giving them time and space to speak into that.
Yeah. Well, and I think it makes such a difference to kids when we can kind of focus on when things did go right, how did they feel afterwards? And so that when it does get hard setting that new routine, and it feels like it's just never going to end or never going to get easier, we can be like, okay, but remember how you felt when we actually, did all the things, or we got it done, and we didn't fight about it, and we just did it. And wouldn't it be nice to feel like that every morning, or at least most mornings?
It would be great. Usually one morning. Remember that one time?
Yeah.
One time in band camp.
Oh, wow. You're aging yourself, Bonnie.
I know.
I'm with you. I heard. I know.
Oh yeah, I did too. But stop aging all of us.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess let's jump to our next point here. So how do we feel that like screens and distractions kind of hinder us in being able to set those routines and rhythms?
Technology is today's technology specifically, right? The advancements we made, the fact that we have these incredibly advanced, incredibly expansive, flat black things.
Computers in our back pocket.
Yeah. Well, but even the computer itself, right? When you open up your laptop and you can access anything. I mean, the heights and depths of humanity is at your fingertips, and the breadth of knowledge and information instantaneously, flying around. It's beautiful, right? It's wonderful, but it's also horrifying. And we have not yet, if you think about kind of our senses and you think about what's distraction? Distraction is when your attention is taken away from the thing that you wish you were attending to, or you were hopeful to give your attention to, your priority, your true priority. Well, no wonder technology is distracting for us, because historically we've had devices that were single purpose, or if they were multi-purpose, they were incredibly tactile, and they were present in the world. Well, these devices, gosh, this is a whole new sensory plane, right? We don't know how to make sense of it, right? We don't know how to sort through and prioritize the inputs that are coming our way. When it dings, or it makes whatever noise yours makes, or vibrates in your pocket, a lot of that's, helpful, right? Those are alerts, but it's not the same alert. This is what I was saying, prior when I was talking with Danielle. It was like you used to hear a rustle, and it meant there might be like a lion in the grass behind you, and you should probably like attend to that because that's a priority. Or, if something, vibrated against your thigh, that also meant something, And so I think you kind of have to first understand what's happening, and you have to be willing to step back and say, wow, this is a very hard thing to make sense of. This is a very hard thing to sort through. So I think if you kind of take that and then you add to it, well, let's say I work really hard to limit my alerts, and I only have apps on my phone that are going to send me, and it's only going to be when, it's an alert that says, hey, it's time to do the next step of my routine or whatever it is. You still have to deal with the fact that when you open the device, it's a whole Pandora's box of options and opportunities. And, this was kind of where we were going in the conversation earlier, is like, you hop on to look up, that type of bird or flower or and you learn something with your kids, or for yourself, or you get a piece of information you needed. Where is that next event that I'm going to? But then all of a sudden you're there, and something else pops up, or, if I just swipe once, that app, it doesn't even matter what it is. That app draws you in. And the next thing you know, you've done the Wordle, spent an hour on Instagram, and are learning about some, Japanese technique for walking in circles meditation that you never even could have imagined was important to your day. And, whatever the thing that you were hoping to attend to for the day is off on the other side. So I think first it's just saying, what's the playing field? And that's the playing field right now. And so putting guardrails, teaching people how to deal with that is one of the most important things that's going to happen. There's a movement. It's great. But I personally am not of the belief that completely throwing out technology is going to be a positive for us. I just think, as with any advancement, we have to deal with the fact that it's brought a lot of negative, and it's brought a new sensory environment. It's brought a new informational environment that we need to adapt to and respond to, and build disciplines and practices so that we can really live into and get the most out of this thing that can be a wonderful tool. Yeah. But I like this conversation. I like this topic a lot. It's something I've spent a lot of time thinking and reading about.
Yeah, I think it's, like you said, it's not going anywhere. We have to train ourselves to not let it, train ourselves to control it and not let it control us. Yeah. And figure, I know, I just discovered this, I don't know, a month ago or whatever, but Apple came out with like, you can set different do not disturbs, but you can actually control which screens show up, like when you're swiping. So you don't see all the apps. Like you could limit it to only see the widgets that you need to see for when you're doing your work time or something like that.
Yes.
The downside is I can swipe all the way over and get my search feature and search any of the apps.
Yeah. Right.
Or my son gets a hold of my phone and just swipes down and just turns off my focus for that, time period. And it's like, I don't know why you bother having this, because we can turn it off anyway. That's not the point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it creates a level of friction. So like one of the things you can do is you can build in friction and there's also a way to turn your phone to be black and white. There are ways, there are all these features that give you feedback or create friction in you accessing, whatever it is. You can even kind of hack the parental controls to make it difficult for you to do things, right? The things that are meant to prevent kids from seeing things they shouldn't, you could also set up to slow you down from seeing, from spending time that you're wasting time on various apps or websites or things you might do. So you can do that, right? But the problem is it takes a lot of effort. And so one of the things that I've seen, the people I look up to and the families I've talked to have really simple practices. Like, hey, our phones go into this drawer during this time. Our phones go to bed before we do in a place that's not our bedroom. As just a couple of quick examples. And I think those are really healthy ways, because one of the things I believe we need to do is help teach our kids healthy interaction with these devices. And we need to actually talk through, okay, why do we do that? Why do we limit the amount of time that you can spend on this thing? Or why is it that I wouldn't just give you an iPad with no controls on it and allow you to like take it into your room all hours of the day? What might I be concerned about as a parent? Why wouldn't I let you watch that particular movie or that particular, engage on that particular video game or whatever it might be that your family's dealing with? I think there are really healthy ways you can do that. The other piece that I would say is, telling a kid no is a great way to make them more interested. And so I think the most compelling families that I've talked to that have healthy relationships with technology actually have really wonderful offline, non-tech habits and rhythms and things they do together as a family that are more forming the desire. It's using desire and love and interest to pull people out of screens and to say, well, you can't play. I mean, you can play charades on Zoom, right? But like, it's not the same. Or you can't do an outdoor obstacle course, or you can't, whatever coming up with what your rhythms and routines as a family might be that would include things that are forming the love and desire of a kid. And look, these devices are great, but it doesn't beat being present together around a table, eating food that's, made well, or having a conversation and laughing from your gut about something that's happening. I mean, or being outside and looking up at the stars. I mean, I heard somebody give a talk once and they were talking about one of the reasons why like these screens are so addictive is they play on the fact that there's very few things in our world that actually emit light. A number of things reflect light, but there's very few things that emit light. And they're the stars, the sun, fireflies, these like magical things, the fire itself. And so we're really drawn in by those things, but I still don't think that the device compares to actually seeing the stars themselves or anything like. So using more of the positive to form habits around and say like, yeah, you could have your phone on, but it's gonna make it harder to see the stars, And so let's turn those off. Let's leave them inside and let's go outside, or whatever it might be that you and your family might want to do.
That's cool.
We put ours in a different room.
Do you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what we do with ours. I leave it. I make that my kids give me their stuff and we leave them plugged in so they can charge and we go find something else to do. And everything's on silent. So, if somebody has notifications on or whatever, you can't. I don't know. I always tell people you should make yourself hard to get a hold of at least once a day.
I don't like taking phone calls, so I make myself hard to get a hold of as much as possible.
That's very millennial of you. So now, earlier you were dating yourself, but now you've come all the way forward the other direction.
But like, you also have to keep in mind, I mean, I never had a pager because, pagers were only for drug dealers. So I only got a cell phone.
And doctors.
Yeah. I only got a cell phone because I was driving myself to horse shows and I needed a way to like call AAA if I broke down on the side of the road.
Yes.
But, that was back in the day where you could only make phone calls on cell phones. It was 25 cents. Yeah, well, yeah. I could do that on my calculator actually. But it was like 25 cents to text someone a picture.
Right.
And there was no keyboard. So you had to hit the number like 3 times to get the different letters. Yeah. Now I'm dating myself.
I remember that. I did that.
I got pretty good.
It was just too much effort. So yeah, I didn't make too many phone calls or text anybody back then. So
there's a lot of advancement that's happened in this space to say where companies have said, hey, how do we give that connectivity without giving a full on, because the crazy thing is even relatively inexpensive. I mean, you don't have to have an iPhone. Relatively inexpensive phones give you access to other, they're still smart. They're still, full on, computers in your pocket at this point. And so you actually have to go out of your way and intentionally buy a smartwatch or, a relay or, these push to talk kind of walkie talkies that limit the folks that you can talk to. But we're seeing families kind of adopt those as an in-between. But of course it's difficult because as a parent, you also want to have that connectivity. And you want to make sure, as kids start to drive, as kids, make their way in the circles that go a little bit further outside your neighborhood and walking distance, how do you take care of them? I think it's really hard because we're used to constant connectivity too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I know. I say that and then I freak out when I can't get a hold of my husband or he doesn't answer the phone. So
for like an entire day.
Well, he does do that.
That's another story.
So ADD tends to run in our family and time blindness. And so my husband will go to thrift stores and look at baseball cards and not realize that 4 hours have gone by. So good times.
Well, I mean, parts of that are good.
Well, yeah. Except when your wife is at home with 3 children and she's going to murder you when you walk in the back door.
Yeah, I would say murder is something you want to avoid.
That's why I drink so much coffee. All right. So we talked about, getting the kids more involved, making them feel like they are contributing to the family and everything. So let's jump into talking about like how we can utilize family meetings. Whether or not, do we need to have them every day? Can it be something that we just do once a week? And kind of what are some things that we can do as part of the family meeting to make everything run more smoothly? I'm going to go back to technology really quick. So one of the other things that I think is really interesting, and this actually will bridge us maybe into family meetings, because for me, a key word is intentionality. And how are we intentional? And so one of the things that we talk about with our customers and with ourselves, and that my wife and I talk about, is how do we make sure we're intentional about what even just comes into the home to start with? And that's not just technology. That's anything. The book or the movies we watch, our kids watch, or any of that kind of stuff. Let's be thoughtful about that, right? And we're not trying to be censors, we're not, but it's just more, hey, there's a time and a place for everything, especially with younger kids. How do we be intentional with that? And technology is all throughout your home. A great example is thermostats. Connected thermostats are these wonderful things where you can create your home to be a certain temperature. You can set your temperature, and in theory, if the furnace, everything's working okay, it's
you walk up, you press a button, or maybe you even pull it up on your phone or your watch, press a button, and then your home's more comfortable. That's technology at its best, I think. But you don't linger there. You don't hang out there. And so pretty quickly, especially with kids and with loving grandparents and extended community, you can end up with all sorts of things in your home because things just get gifted to you. And your kid buys it with their own allowance or anything like that. And so just taking that extra step to say, like, is this going to move us in a direction we want it to move, or is this going to distract and disintegrate our home? Because a lot of technology, it's not just the distraction piece. It's technology screams at us that we live, that it's all about you. It's like you are the center of the universe, and the real world actually doesn't do that at all. But these flat black devices, scream like, I'm customizing everything for you. Everything you want to see, anything you want to have, anything you want to do. And the home is actually one of the first places we learn, to the point earlier, like to the conversations we were having earlier about kids struggling with this, is like, you're not alone. And the world doesn't revolve around you, much to all of our disappointment sometimes. And so I think it's just this opportunity. And so being intentional about what comes in and where it lives and how it interacts, who gets to use it when, including the adults. I mean, my kids love to call me on, hey, Dad, no phones at the table, or whatever. And I'm grateful for that, because that's a rule I want. But when we say it together and we say, hey, this is our intention as a family, that we would have device-free dinner or device-free breakfast, it's fair game to call anybody on it. And that really empowers and equips them. And so, that's my lens. That's my approach. It's kind of this grace-based, intentional approach. And I think that's the same way that you create intentional family time, is you kind of say, hey, what do we need? What do we want as a family this week? You sit down and you have the conversation. And so, we can talk through all that, but I really think if you're not, you just have to be really intentional about how you spend your time and what comes into your home, and then what comes out of your home. What do you spend? What do you build? What do you grow?
Yeah. And I think there needs to be a level of discipline there, at least when you're first setting it up, because, eventually it is going to become a habit, because really the technology became our current habit. We need to break that habit. So it's, there's going to be some friction there, like trying to set that, but reminding yourself of, this is why I'm doing it. And, this is my priority. This is where I want my focus to be, rather than just letting the distractions control our focus.
Yeah, because if you're not intentional, it's going to be dictated to you by whatever's around you, and whatever algorithm is dictating to you. So, and so one of the ways that we build intentional rhythms in our homes, and this is not, none of this is like talking to families, reading books on family, and pulling out kind of general accepted best practices, is to have a weekly touch point. Some people would call that a family meeting, and you have this family meeting and you sit down and you include everyone and you say, hey, what's the most important thing going on? Well, actually, first you look backwards and you say, hey, what went well and what didn't go well the previous week? And it's an opportunity. And even just that, the opportunity to say positives and negatives about the week before in a intentional environment. Number one, it creates a space where if a kid during the week is having something, or anyone, mom, dad, or kid, is having a hard time, they know they have a time that they can bring that up. And that actually is an incredible pressure release valve to say, like, things aren't going to accrue over weeks or months or years. And you never spent time with me, or I always have to do this thing. Whether or not that's grounded in reality, especially when those things are left unexpressed and those things are left in the relative dark, it's only going to fester. And so giving an opportunity to look backward and say, what's going well, so we can do more of that, and what's not going well, so we can hopefully find a way to address it. It doesn't mean, everything, a kid might say, well, what's not going well is vegetables at dinner. It's like, sorry, that's not an option in our household, at least, to not be on the table, but appreciate your feedback, son. And so I think that's where we start. And then you use that and you move into, hey, what are the priorities? What are the most important things this week? And those can be events, but they also could be, hey, we've been saying for a long time, we're going to clean out the shed, and we need the shed for whatever reason coming up. Or, hey, we said we're going to make something for grandma because she's got a milestone birthday or whatever it is. So and then it could be like, I've got a spelling test that blah, blah, blah. So you get all that out. And I think that's where having a calendar that's focused on the week ahead gives you an opportunity, and it has to be shared. It can't just be, hey, we're all going to put this on our individual. There has to be a place that everybody trusts. This is a source of truth. And that's really a key part of the family meeting, is having a system where all that lives, and sitting down and kind of moving through all these things. So you start with kind of this retrospective previous week, then you do this, what are the big rocks? And then I like to think about big dreams. It's like a fun section during the family meeting. And it's like, hey, what are your hopes and dreams for this week? And it can be outlandish, it could be silly, or it could just be like, yeah, I actually really want to go on, like me, I'd love to go on a run. It's like, it hasn't happened in weeks. Well, good. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't, doesn't matter, but everybody gets an opportunity to express that. And when you know what your priorities are, and kind of, you might be able to say, hey, yeah, we could actually fit that in, or the weather looks like it's going to be good. We could all go do this thing. And there's some coordination that needs to happen. And then the fourth kind of key agenda point that we recommend on a family meeting is coordination. It's just all the little things, like my wife and I alternate. Our kids go to schools that don't have buses, and so we coordinate on who drops them off. This day I can do it, this day I can't. Kids maybe it's some kid's friend has a birthday, or it's having people over. How are we going to accomplish that? All the different, it's kind of the sand that fills in the cracks around. And it's sometimes, if I'm really honest, when I talk about these 4 points, sometimes it all happens in one sitting. Sometimes we do the kind of big rocks and big dreams at a meal over the weekend. Sometimes one of us really kind of says, like, hey, here's what's happening this week, and we only have 5-10 minutes to kind of make sure everybody's on board with it. Sometimes we don't include the kids, so it's giving yourself that grace to go, like, we have this rhythm of family meeting. We try to do this every week, but we recognize that every week it's not going to happen, at least, and it's probably pretty rarely going to happen the exact same way every week. And then, that meeting can happen in 15 minutes, or it can happen in an hour with a meal. And we know we have some families in our community, in our world, who, the family meeting, the kids are all grown in college. The family meeting was like one of the defining pieces of their growing up. And they played a game and then had a meal. And as the kids got older, it was the kids' job to cook the meal, and It became like the central hinge point of their weeks. That puts a little too much pressure, I think, on it, for at least me and my family. So giving yourself the grace to say, hey, the most important thing is we're setting intention for the week. We're making sure we're not missing anything, and we're giving ourselves an opportunity to actually communicate and collaborate, and we're including the kids. That's like the baseline. Those are some like best practices, but the hope and dream is that it could be, this incredible hinge point for your week that your kids remember and implement in their own families.
And I think one of the most important pieces of it is you're teaching that communication to your kids.
That's right.
It's because I think it's such a struggle with so many families in this day and age, especially when you have so many families who aren't sitting down to a meal together, is that they really, like, everyone's off doing their own thing and living their own lives, and
Yes.
they forget to include everybody else and let everyone else know what is going on.
It's really good. Do either of you have rhythms like this, or something similar, some other way? I mean, you may not call it a family meeting.
Since I run a home-based business, I call it a staff meeting, but I haven't been super good about doing it every week. I need to get better at it. And I think we're actually going to move it to Saturday mornings so that I can include my husband, because it usually just ends up being me and the kids when it's during the week.
Yeah.
We try, but it doesn't always happen like we plan.
When does it ever?
Yeah, well, but our weeks go a lot better and a lot smoother if, you know, we get the chance to lay everything out and, you know, my kids get to say, you know, we want to play this game or do that thing, or, you know, we haven't had a field trip, so let's, you know, I want to go do this, or so
Yeah,
it's
my kids
helpful.
like it because they can hold the adults accountable. Like, hey, you said we were going to do this thing,
Yeah.
and it hasn't
Yeah.
happened yet.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a
That's
science
important.
project.
That's important.
Oh yeah,
feedback,
definitely.
You know, it's like so. I mean, yes, as parents, it's like they could say that probably about a lot of things, but I do think it's important for them to learn to do that and to advocate for themselves and to have a space where they know they can do that. So it's good.
You're hitting the witching hour, aren't you, Danielle?
Mhm.
But also, I wanted to point out, like, you mentioned big rocks as part of the planning. And I think that's such an important part of keeping everything from becoming overwhelming. Because I think sometimes we can look at all the little things we want to do, and that's where a lot of that busyness comes in. And we spend so much time focusing on the sand that the big rocks don't get planned out. And if we would just prioritize the big rocks, then everything would end up falling into place. Danielle, I'm going to mute you for a second. No, but I think that, like, everything else would end up falling into place. I mean, it's funny how all the sand seems to just take care of itself. But if we focus on the big rocks and get the big rocks done, then everything more gets accomplished and we feel less overwhelmed and less stressed.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the things that sometimes we also have too much sand, yeah, in real life, sand is really hard to move and it's annoying, you know, so like it's good. It's probably a good thing.
I live in Florida. I understand.
Good metaphor. but I think that, you know, I think that what we've seen when a family has a good system and they're having these conversations is that over time, they start to be able to look at a week and they start to be able to say, gosh, we have way too much going on this week. And you can't do that if you don't actually sit down and put it all out. It's kind of, you know, your calendar is a bit like a budget. And it's where you say, here's how I'm going to spend my time and my energy. And especially in a family, we are acutely aware of the fact that if we drain the energy and we overtax the time of any member of the family, but particularly like the collective family, everything goes more poorly. Like everything is just worse. And it's harder to have a good conversation over dinner. You end up with like not the food that maybe everybody would want because you're rushing to get something, you know, all those things, any number of examples. You don't have the energy to be creative and find that like great conversation we're going to have on the ride to whatever activity you're going towards. Everyone's just tired and worn out. And so sitting down and saying, hey, what are the top priorities? And then looking at the week and going, oh gosh, we got too much sand here. Or we got too many priorities here. Interesting, like side thing is like the word priority was singular for like 400 years. And we've completely, obliterated that intention. But I think the whole idea is saying like, when you sit down and you actually budget your time as a family, you're going to have a better result in the same way that if you budget your finances, in theory, you're going to have a better result. You still got to live into it. You still got to, and it's not easy and it's messy, but we're dealing with like an incredibly complex thing we're trying to do here. We're bringing human life into the world and we're growing it up and we're dealing with ever-changing, evolving personalities, needs, seasons, all of that. And it's a wonderful, beautiful mess with great promise and great potential.
Yeah. Well, and too, like you're talking about the energy that you have each day. I think it's important for us to remember, okay, yeah, we may be awake for 14 hours a day. That doesn't mean we have 14 hours worth of energy. Just like we
Amen.
can't just fill that entire day and expect to be able to function.
Yeah. And you have to give yourself the grace to say, you know what, some days 4 hours worth of energy is all I have for whatever reason. There's any, you know, could be illness, could be sleep, could be, you know, the amount of effort you gave the day before. But it's a weird time and energy are weird kind of dimensions to chart. And when you're really honest with yourself, sometimes it's the days where you give like a few hours of really concerted, great effort that you get the most leverage. And other days you work hard for 14 hours and you feel like you get nowhere. And so I think it's really important to kind of think about both those dimensions and give yourself the grace to say, hey, you know what, if I'm honest, today I got a few hours in me. Or, you know what, no, today's I got 10. I got 10 great hours of energy. I'm feeling great. I've had a lot of coffee or whatever.
Danielle makes fun of my coffee addiction. I see nothing wrong with it. Can I take you off mute now?
I don't know.
Are you ungrounded?
I was gonna say, did you take me out of the corner?
I feel like the children in the background's not. It's like it's part of what you're talking about.
It's part of the ambiance. That's what it is. It really wasn't the kids. It was the barking dogs that I'm like, hang on, we can't. It's harder to talk over them. I'm used to.
That's part of my life. I'm sorry.
Why do you think I'm at a recording studio and not at my house?
But this is real life. I'm working from home.
I know. I mean, if I was at home, we would have been interrupted with no less than 4 guinea pigs and 2 hamsters.
Yeah, but it's work from homestead, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, true. What do you expect? That's on brand.
There you go.
I'll still choose the recording studio. Although my internet crapped out on me this morning, so I couldn't have worked from home if I wanted to. Okay, well, we're about at the end of our time, but let's talk about Loam and how it can help families. I know it seems almost like an irony that we're talking about using a website to help us use less screens and be more intentional.
It's one of the great, with the question we asked a lot and still ask is how are we a technology company that helps people spend, less time on technology, or at least less time consumed and addicted. And our great hope is that we would be like that thermostat where it's referential, it's helpful, it's useful, but it fades. And it's not this thing that, sucks you in and engages your attention for all this time, but it's an incredibly helpful tool. And so that's what we hope we're building. Our first product, as we've kind of referenced, is a platform that is meant to replace the chalkboard, whiteboard, wall calendar that is in a lot of homes. We found, at least for our homes, that now that we all have these computers in our pockets, we wanted access to that information, but we couldn't get it when we were at our offices or at the grocery store or wherever we might need, moving between practices or school pickups. And so tried to build a digital version of that was reflective of the wonderful diversity of needs and customizations that a lot of families do. So we kind of have core features that you'd expect. There's a meal planning component. There's a weekly calendar. There is with calendar integration, so you can easily pull data in from wherever you currently have it. There's this routine. We're building a more robust chore platform. All of these things, but we did all that in such a way, number one, that it would hopefully be calm and visual. So it could be inclusive of the kids. We built it to be shared. And so that it wouldn't just be this individual thing, but it's a place for the collective family collaboration and communication. And, the images are even for folks who can't read, so that they can be empowered. It's very easy to kind of upload and import your own images too. So that's all there. And then I think on top of all that, we have what we call an inspiration engine, which is a bank of hundreds, not thousands, not millions, but just hundreds of ideas for meals, for activities, for conversation topics. And these are meant to be inspirational. So it's if there's a meal, it might just be like tacos. And if there's a conversation, it might just be, here's a question. It's not an extensive list or a whole recipe or anything like that, because we believe that every family, every individual has like an idea and has a recipe and has a thought for how they might do that. You just get paralyzed every once in a while. You get to that moment where it's Saturday afternoon and you have 3 hours with the kids or wherever, and you're like, I want to do something outside that's active. And I had all these great ideas. I read all these blogs. I saw these things, and I can't remember what any of them are. And so just the ability really quickly to get these little like bullet points in a curated list in a space on a platform you're already using, we think is helpful. And so that's some of that trellis we're putting up that helps families spend quality time together, have great conversations. And so, the conversation topics is kind of the same thing. Hey, we're about to sit down to a family meal. We don't always get to do this. It'd be cool if we had a conversation that was more than just, whatever jokes our kids are liking to tell or whatever at the time, or something that's going on, work or any of that. So we really are trying to build that trellis so that families get that quality time, have those quality conversations. And and then, you can learn more about Loam with Loam. So Loam is spelled Lome. So with Loam.com. And then we have a special offer for your listeners. Their first month free. So if you go to withloam.com/grounded, there will be a code there. You can learn more. You can look around at our website as well. But the code there you can put in when you're creating your account, and it'll give you your first month free. And then thereafter, it's a monthly subscription. It's currently $6 a month.
Yeah, we were playing around with it this weekend and getting the kids set up on it and everything. And I like how it's like a playing board. So as we're going through the morning routine, if one kid is getting his done faster, his little like game piece moves down the board. Whereas while we're waiting 3 hours for my daughter to finally get out of bed, she's still at the top. And my kids do tend to be very competitive. So, that's a big plus too, because they're like, oh, well, my piece is all the way down here.
It's a pro and a con. I think there are times for my kids where the competition is actually probably more corrosive to them completing the routine. But I think generally it's meant to just be a visual path they can walk down, and gives them feedback on what's next and what do they need to do. Yeah, it's absolutely one of the things in my family, at least, and I know in my co-founder, one of the things we use every day on Loam. It's great to have a calendar. It's great to have all the other things, but the visual routines are really powerful, helpful thing. And, I always saw these things on Pinterest and, wherever. I was like, oh, that's a cool, like, chart. I could never make that but we built the platform to be so visual, and it's incredibly customizable. You can reorder, there's imagery. We built our own emoji set, a wonderful designer, but you can even upload your own images. And so it's very, very easy to make it look and feel like whatever you need your home, but still be visual and calm.
Well, I noticed those emojis, like they're keyworded. So I added on one of the routines, I added feed pets, I think. And it automatically pulled up an emoji like with a dog and cat on it.
Yeah.
And put it, I was like, oh, perfect. I don't even have to find an image. It's already right there.
Yeah. We're working hard every day. We're expanding that base because we really think that, the more visual it can be, the more inclusive and fun. And every family, I mean, you don't want to bring something into your home that looks like, Outlook, like it was, made for some workplace. That's not home. That's not for your home. That's for the boardroom.
Well, and I've bought printables and stuff from Etsy, and it's amazing how quickly my children can lose a laminated printable. Like,
yes.
Or the dry erase boards, they magically get erased before the chores get finished. Yeah. So this is something that can't be lost, can't be destroyed. They're stuck with it whether they like it or not.
Yes.
Sometimes that's the approach I have to take with my children. It's not going anywhere, so you might as well get used to it.
And neither am I. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, Riley, it was great talking to you today. I really enjoyed this conversation. Danielle, for all of the 2 words that she said the entire time, I think
I told you.
I told you. This is why it tends to feel like I end up feeling guilty that I'm just controlling the conversation. But
well, I appreciate both of you for having me on and engaging what we're doing at Loam. But even more so, I think, engaging your listeners and the homes that you work with. I think it's so important that we build kind of rhythms and routines. And I think you're helping families do that. So I really appreciate the work you're doing, the conversations you're having, and your approach. So thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us today. So, all right. Well, that is it for this week. This episode has been sponsored by Loam. Go check them out with loam.com/grounded and get your first month free and try it out and see if it helps your family to be more intentional and make your lives feel a little less overwhelmed. All right. And we'll catch you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Grounded in Simplicity podcast. If we were able to help you in any way, please share this episode with a friend and also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. You can also join us over on Patreon at Grounded in Simplicity and help to support this podcast, as well as become a patron and get a behind the scenes look at the creation of our podcast and even have some input on future episodes.